Hey guys, Jason Cardamone here. So I have an incredible story to tell you right now about exactly how Date with Destiny changes your life. So this is Tuesday morning. It's like 4 or 5 in the morning. I've got almost zero sleep the last 24 hours. I've actually been in the hospital with my wife and my youngest son. And before I tell you all that, I need to back us up a few days. So Date with Destiny, the last day of it was Saturday. So Saturday was basically integration day, and then at the end of Saturday night, really late that night, was like celebration. And this was like, celebration probably started at 11 or 12 in the morning or something. And then, we're kind of saying goodbye to our teams and everything. And I got back to my room about 3 a.m. So that would be 3 a.m. on Sunday morning. And so obviously, just been through Date with Destiny for 8 days. I'm freaking on top of the whole world. I get back, my phone wasn't getting service in the room we were in the whole week. And so I would only get text messages, emails, and phone, anything later on. So somewhere my phone had actually come in and I had a missed call from my wife. And my wife very rarely calls me. I usually make all the outgoing calls and things to her. So that was like, well, that's interesting. I check, and I have dozens of text messages from my wife explaining how she had been in the emergency room with our youngest son. He's 19 months old. And so, so obviously that's a real test of what all this work I've been doing, You just find out your youngest in the hospital. So it's basically like 3:30 or 4 in the morning as I'm seeing this, because I didn't pull up my phone right away when I got back to my room. And so, call my wife, find out there's some kind of a high fever. He'd actually had some kind of like, almost like a seizure in just his left arm and his left leg. And so basically they went to the ER, they got cleared there to go back home, and they had to be on, medication every 4 hours, not medication, ibuprofen and things every 4 hours to keep his fever below 102. And we were supposed to check in with our pediatrician on Monday morning, which was about 24 hours ago. So, so anyway, fast forward, I'll skip a few things and things are just, I come home, all my family notices a difference. My parents were actually here. My dad picked me up from the airport. Every person noticed a major difference in who I am. And so, we go to the pediatrician today. So that was yesterday morning, Monday morning. We go to the pediatrician. And long story short is our son is extremely dehydrated, and he's still having problems fighting off the fever, a little bit problems with it. And so they want us to go check into the hospital. So we do that. I'm going to fast forward even more. We've basically been in the hospital. So we go to the doctor on noon today. We checked in the hospital about 2 p.m. And I apologize, yesterday checked in about 2 p.m. And it is now... Actually, yeah, it's 4:45 in the morning on Tuesday morning. So we've been checked into the hospital now for about 14, 15 hours. And so what I want to do is I'm going to skip over some of the stuff in the hospital because there's a major thing that made a difference. And so we're in the hospital, and we had to do, they did what they do. They had an IV in, so they're checking blood, they're checking urine. He did 2 different urinary catheters where they got 0 urine. He was so dehydrated. And so they have him on fluids and everything. They finally get some urine. They're sending out, doing all this blood and urine tests to check for infections and all kinds of different tests going on. And so one particular test came back and had really high level of proteins. And so it was actually so high. It's supposed to be a reading of between 0 and 8, and the reading was 156. And everything else was totally normal, a couple dozen other tests. Now, so there was a few other tests that they have to wait another 24, 48 hours to hear back from. But this was so high, they were like, we are immediately doing a spinal tap. There's definitely something not okay. And they actually, we talked some things out, backed up, and then they decided, actually, let's retest the blood, and let's redo this test. It'll take 2 to 4 hours here. and we need to retest because this reading is so off the charts, it's totally crazy. And our doctor had called several other doctors, and nobody had ever heard of a reading this high. So they retest, and it actually comes back extremely high again. It's not 150, but this time it's like 120 or something. But it is still way, way off the charts. So what it means is that there's some kind of inflammation happening in his body. So long story short, they actually, because the seizures are only on one side, instead of a spinal tap, they have to do a CAT scan, which is, you know, scanning the head, and also they wanted to x-ray his lungs. They did both of those, but came back totally clear. Then, and if those were cleared, then they immediately go to spinal tap. One of the main things they're checking for is meningitis. And so, if you know anything about a spinal tap, it's pretty much one of the most painful things you can go through. Our son is 19 months old. And so, my history throughout my life, I've been the guy that literally passes out at the sight of blood. If I see anybody in pain, I have a huge heart. I am so empathetic for people. I pass out like that. Like, no kidding, it's happened dozens of times throughout my life. So I can't see people go through pain. I get faint. I pass out very easily. And so we go to do the spinal tap. My wife has a medical background in the veterinary field. And so she's always been the person, you know, the shots, everything, she's totally taking all this stuff. But when it comes to a spinal tap, especially on a 19-month-old, she knows what that means. We had one done on our daughter when she was 2 weeks old. And a 2-week-old compared to a 19-month-old, it's a totally different experience. So my wife knew the hell our son was about to go through. So basically, I took control. And I was only able to do this because of all the transformational changes that happened to me at Date with Destiny. So I actually held part of my son, and Nurse held the other part of him. And through the entire spinal tap, my wife, she couldn't have done this. She started to just freak out before I even did it. So normally it would have been a couple nurses because my wife just wouldn't have been able to do it. And so I did it. I held him the whole thing. And literally, it was the worst fucking sound I've ever heard in my life. My son screaming. It was the worst sound I have ever heard in my life. But I was fucking present the whole time. I was present. I was there with him. I was actually singing the ABCs to him, which I found out later actually soothed everybody, all the nurses, the doctor, and even my wife. And we dealt with all of that. Now, through this entire time, I have been so present. I couldn't have been this person of strength for my wife, for the nurses, for the doctor, for everybody that's found strength in me. I couldn't have given anybody this strength a week ago before Date with Destiny because I didn't freaking have the strength. I would have been the little pussy sitting in the corner covering his ears and freaking out thinking about all the pain his son's going through instead of being there and being present and helping everybody. So for whatever that's worth for you, Date with Destiny absolutely has had profound changes in my life. There's still all this uncertainty. By the way, the spinal tap wasn't even successful. They had to do it 2 or 3 separate times and they couldn't get it tapped correctly at all. So we got no results from that. But I have a complete knowing everything happens for a reason. Everything that just had to happen, maybe it was because my wife had to see how strong I could be. Maybe all of us had to see how strong our son could be and go through all that and deal with the worst pain he's ever dealt with, but then be, you know, smiling 15, 20 minutes later. Maybe it was all the strength the nurses and doctors found in our family, in the son, in me, whoever. I don't know all the reasons why, but this was all meant to be. Everything in our lives that happens is meant to be. I talked to you guys in one of the previous videos about every person I had sat by was meant, they offered me something that was just, there's no other way besides it was divine intervention. All of these things are meant to be. Maybe it's I pulled my head out of my butt and I'm actually seeing all these things and how they're all meant to be. Hey guys, and so if you don't know what a spinal tap is, it's basically where they basically stick a needle into your spine. And so we had to get my son down on this table and curl his back over so that imagine if this is his body, this is his head, this is his legs. We had to get him completely curled up into the tightest ball we possibly could so that the spine kind of, like imagine this is the spine, so that it would spread out a little bit like this, and that then the needle, I believe it goes right between the vertebrae and goes into the spine to try to get some of the fluid in there. And actually, so you can imagine we're holding him down literally full force. Like, I'm afraid I'm going to crush my son's head. I was holding so hard. And so I'm holding his upper back and his head at the top part. And a nurse is holding basically his legs and the upper part, or middle part of his back. And we had to keep him exactly still so that as the needle goes in here, if it messes up, it could paralyze him for life and just basically kill him. So we had to keep him completely still. And he was so strong. We actually weren't, the reason why it wasn't successful, we weren't able to keep it. As the needle went in, we weren't able to keep him still, and so it just moved around too much, and we were never able to find the right pocket to pull the spinal fluid out. So, get back to the video now. So anyway, for whatever it's worth, guys, Date with Destiny completely changed all of my life for the better, and I can't tell you how good I feel right now. Given the whole story, we don't even know what's going on with my son besides there's some kind of inflammation in his body and we can't detect it down. So even with all this uncertainty, I literally feel better than I've ever felt in my life. And there's a complete groundedness, and it's faith is what it is. I have complete faith everything is totally as it's supposed to be right now. So for whatever it's worth, I wanted to shoot this for you guys right while I'm in state so you could see everything right in my face, in my body, everything. So anyway, guys, for what it's worth, I hope this helps them. I'll continue to shoot some more, post Date with Destiny videos, because my life has been a whirlwind, ever since the event ended. As soon as I got those text messages from my wife and called her, it's just been this crazy adventure ever since then. So to your ultimate success, and God bless everybody.